Good evening, you're watching Estuary TV News. Coming up, saddle sores, police advice on protecting the equipage. Business is booming and how to keep it that way in the North Sea. And I'll be talking to Dr. Peter Melton of the North East Lincolnshire Clinical Commissioning Group. Welcome to Estuary TV News. I'm Hugh Richards. First of all, it's over to Richard Morris for the news headlines.
Two power stations employing around 70 people in our area look set for closure. The gas-powered stations at Killingholme and Brigg were both built in the early 90s, meaning they're now too inefficient. Centrica, who own the stations, had been running a process to sell the stations, but bids received were significantly below the company's valuation. In a statement, Simon Merriweather, Managing Director of Centrica Energy's power generation business, said, "Unfortunately, we've had to make the difficult decision to consult on closing the Killingholme and Brigg power stations. We know this is an unsettling time for the team and the news will create a great deal of uncertainty, but we will be doing everything we can to supporting them in the coming week." Centrica have decided to continue running their South Humber Bank station. North East Lincolnshire Council's Cabinet met yesterday to approve the Council's budget. The mid-term financial plan will see council tax rises by 1.98% every year until 2018-19, while increasing the Council's use of reserve money. Councillor Mick Burnett said that he hoped members of the public would understand at a time when the Council has a hugely reduced budget.
We have earmarked reserves for specific projects, and that money now is going to be used. So things like, some of the regeneration work, that funding will be used for that. But also where we haven't spent earmarked reserves, we can put that back into the general fund, back into being able to deliver services. Because at the end of the day, we're a local authority. It's our job to deliver services to the public.
Police investigating the death of a man on Bethlehem Street have named him as Shane Bauer. A man has been charged with his manslaughter and is due to appear in Grimsby Magistrates Court today. A new consultation is open for Grimsby residents to have their say on the planned stadium for Grimsby Town Football Club. Public consultations will be held on the next 3 Sundays starting this week. People can also shortly start sending in hard copies of their responses as well as completing the consultation online.
What we want to do is have, over the next 3 Sundays, a consultation at site whereby people can come and they can ask questions, look at the scale and perspective. We don't want to impact on their amenity. It should work very, very well and least harm the residents and in real terms bring a raft of benefits.
That's all from me and I'll be back with more news soon. Bye for now.
Lincolnshire horse owners are being advised to get their equipment, or their tack, marked as part of a free scheme from the police force. Tomorrow, the force will be attending a car boot sale where officers will be on hand to help with the marking process. Owners getting their equipment marked could have it returned more quickly in the event of theft, as Richard Morris discovered.
It's something many horse owners can neglect to do, but tack marking is very important. Tomorrow, in order to promote the need for it, Lincolnshire Police will be offering free tack marking to people attending a car boot sale at Lincolnshire Rural Activities Centre. Sally Reid, the PCSO for Louth, explained the importance of the procedure.
Tack marking's a way to protect your tack, your horse tack obviously, in the unfortunate event that it was stolen. Obviously it would help the police reunite them items with you. So it's putting your postcode and your house name or number on it so that we know where it's coming from.
So how much of a problem is horse tack theft in the Lincolnshire area?
Luckily at the moment, and touch wood, it's not been too bad within our area, but I think that is because we've done so much promotion about getting your tack marked. And we give out all this sort of information about trailer security and security around your yards and farms and things. So we're trying to get one step ahead all the time. Tack's so expensive, and when it's marked, it's just a way of sort of high prevention of sort of putting or deterring folks from sort of stealing it. And if it did get stolen, and because it's marked, it's a way of us sort of proving the identity of who owned it if we sort of go to a raid anywhere and find numerous amounts of tack.
The process only takes a few minutes and will be available from 6 p.m. tomorrow at the site, which is on the road next to Kenwick Park Hotel.
And that event will be happening from 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. You're watching Estuary TV News. A little later in this programme, we'll be looking at another Dog of the Week, and Dan Kemp will bring you all the sports news. I'm joined by Dr. Peter Melton of the North East Lincolnshire Clinical Commissioning Group. Peter, many thanks for coming in.
Evening here.
What does the Clinical Commissioning Group do?
Well, the clinical commissioning groups are the new arrangements that the government put in place. The idea is to actually get doctors and nurses working together to make some of the key decisions for the population that they serve. I think probably the way I try and describe it best is actually taking what works well out of the consulting room between the doctor and the nurse and the patient and actually applying that to the whole population. And what I mean by that is actually a good consultation. I'll listen to what your problems, your concerns are. I'll make a decision in terms of what I think the problem is and then work with you in terms of describing what some of the options are about what we can do to help you. And what we're trying to do through the clinical commissioning group is do that in terms of some of the big strategic changes that need to be made for the whole population in terms of how we deliver health and social care. So the idea is to talk to the population to say, you know, these are some of the outcomes that we're getting at the moment. We think we can possibly improve them by doing it in this way. Do you agree? So it's a different way of working. It's about getting the health professionals working with the public to actually come up with solutions together.
And I should mention that as well as sort of being on the strategic side of things, as it were, you're on the front line as a GP in Immingham yourself, so you've got the hands-on experience of this, as it were.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's one of the beauties of the changes to the reforms. It's actually about getting people who were there, getting the sleeves rolled up, looking after the patients, and actually applying that knowledge to some of these difficult issues. So it's about having, you know, some real intelligence about clinical care, but actually what's happening down there at the grassroots level.
Well, this suggests that it's more, that the requirement is more, you know, somebody turns up ill and you give them medicine and make them better. This suggests that there's more to it than that. That there's a greater health regime that's required, you know, an aspect of public education, how to look after oneself.
Yeah, I think a lot of patients, obviously, when they present to a doctor or a nurse, think that actually the solution is in a prescription or something that we do in terms of using our skills and expertise. And actually that's very rarely the case. A lot of it is exactly as you say. It's about reassurance, it's about explaining what the problems, what the conditions are. And more often than not, the gift is actually in the individual themselves or their family or their friends. And increasingly one of the things that we're trying to do is actually support individuals, families and the wider community to be able to manage their own health and well-being. So, I mean, for example, some of the schemes that we've got in place locally, the most successful ones are often the ones where the community are helping one another.
Advise me, I'm a middle-aged male who's unhealthy. What should I do? What am I doing wrong?
Well, I think the advice in terms of health, people often get a little bit fed up of hearing and they often switch off. But it is the same advice. It's about exercise. So, I mean, a lot of evidence that actually just walking for 30 minutes a day, you get a massive health gain from that. And if you can supplement that by doing some what we call aerobic exercise, where you get a bit short of breath for 30 minutes 3 times a week, actually that's really good for you. In terms of diet, I mean, one of the things is actually Mediterranean diet is very good. Living here in North East Lincolnshire, a lot of fish around and things, a good opportunity to have a healthy diet. I mean, it's interesting when you look at the Japanese, that's one of the healthiest diets in the world. The Japanese actually have very high rates of smoking, they have high rates of blood pressure, and when they live in Japan, their death rates from what we call vascular disease, heart attacks and strokes, is very low. But if you take the Japanese out of Japan, when they go over to California, their death rates increase significantly. And it appears that actually it's the diet that's making the biggest difference.
You doctors are all the same, aren't you? You're very big on the health benefits of exercise and abstinence, and perhaps you underestimate the happiness benefits of sitting quietly with a glass of whiskey and a cigar.
We don't underestimate that at all. And I think these are decisions that patients, individuals have to make for themselves. And you can't underestimate that. I mean, I think sometimes, particularly with the alcohol question, it is confusing. I mean, the government try and give some clear guidance and advice about trying to reduce the amount of alcohol. But I have to say the evidence for alcohol is mixed, and that there is some clear evidence that a moderate amount of alcohol can actually have some health benefits. I think on the opposite
Good.
side, I think on the opposite side though, the smoking, there is no health benefit at all for smoking. And one of the things I'll often say to patients in the consulting room, if I can persuade, support, encourage one person to stop smoking in that week, I've probably done more good than the other 120 people I've seen in the week. So if I can actually stop somebody stopping smoking, I think that week's been a success. I
feel duly chastised. Can I just ask you about this new emergency number that's been set up?
Yeah, locally we've got our own local service in terms of emergency helpline that complements. People will have heard of the 111 service, but the 111 service is often a little bit more remote. It doesn't understand the local circumstances and the local way in which we organise services. So we've got our own service, which is 256 222. And to give an example, over the month of December, which was our busiest month, we took 3,700 calls through that service, compared to less than 1,000 for 111.
That's just in North East Lincolnshire?
Just in North East Lincolnshire. And actually, more than 1,000 of those patients were just given advice, so they were able to help themselves, exactly the point you were making earlier. About 1,500 of them, we actually organised for them to see a GP, and that's both in hours and out of hours. About 500 of them we actually organised for them to see a community or social work professional, and then the remainder, sometimes they were emergencies where they needed to attend accident and emergency or call an ambulance. So it's a much more responsive service, and it's manned by nurses and doctors, whereas again sometimes the 111 service it's more difficult to get some of that clinical advice. So we think it's a good service and we want to develop and grow it.
This winter, which I hope is now coming to an end, has been characterised by very high pressure on A&E departments, as people who've gone to A&E when perhaps they should have gone to the GP or just had an aspirin and stayed in bed. How much pressure is there on those A&E departments?
There's no question that the A&E departments across the whole country have been struggling. Again, locally we're in a much better position than most of the other areas, but we have been struggling. I think one of the challenges for us is to actually, I think, come up with a different model of care. So in the country, I think we have an excellent model of emergency and critical care. So when you're really poorly, if you have a road traffic accident or a heart attack, actually the services will respond to you. But a lot of our patients that we're dealing with don't easily fit into one of those categories. They're often the frail, elderly with multiple problems. And the emergency care service doesn't really address their needs in the most effective way. They often take a lot more time. It takes time to understand what's going on, their expectations, their family's expectations. And I think one of the things that locally we're trying to do, but other areas are equally trying to do, is to complement the emergency service with a much more urgent care service, so that we can respond for those more complex patients in a different way.
That's a nice distinction between urgent and emergency, as it were, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it reflects the fact that sometimes we have some service gaps, and patients sometimes we haven't organised the services in the most effective way. So the default sometimes is patients, when they're scared, frightened, anxious, will call 999 or will go to accident and emergency because they don't know where else to go. And I think the challenge for us is actually to be much more responsive and available, so that they don't feel that they have to respond to accident and emergency and 999.
Your group is unique in the country, I think, in that as well as being responsible for the direct healthcare, it's also the adult social services side as well. How's that working, having the two complementing each other?
Oh, it's made a tremendous difference, and it's been a great example of working between the NHS and the local authority. So the local authority, who are accountable for adult social care, have delegated that responsibility to us through the NHS, so we can have a much more joined up approach. Just from a practical point of view, my own practice covers 3 local authority boundaries. So I have patients who live within North East Links, I have patients who live in Lincolnshire, and I have patients who live in North Lincolnshire. And actually, my community team, my community matrons, they sometimes pull their hair out when the patients are in some of the other geographical areas, because we can't provide a joined-up response.
I have a vision of Hattie Jakes, but every Englishman, when they hear the word matron, will think of Hattie Jakes, won't they? Just finally, the NHS as a whole is ring-fenced budget, of course, but it's not, that budget doesn't rise as fast as inflation is rising, and medical costs rise faster than inflation. So how much would be enough for the NHS? Because it's a bottomless pit, isn't it?
I think that's a discussion that is actively going on at the moment between the politicians and the public. As you say, you can never actually find enough money to meet the expectations of the public, and I think it's something that we'll be hearing more about as we go through the election period.
Well, there's an element to, I mean, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, and I know you're not a politician, but there's an element of having to define what it is that we expect from not just the NHS, but also just from medicine as a whole. As technology increases and gets more and more expensive, new drugs are invented, but they're very expensive. We can't really expect to pay for immortality, can we?
I think you're right that we do have, and I think hopefully one of the differences between the CCG arrangements is we can have those open and frank discussions with the public, so that we can actually say there is only a limited amount of resource, and what is it that's really important to you, and what are some of the things that we shouldn't be providing.
I'll have to stop you there. Peter, thank you so much for coming in. That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you. It's been a very positive few days for our region. £4 million is being pumped into the local economy for investment in business, and the Humber Estuary is set to become the Aberdeen of the offshore wind industry, according to Mark O'Reilly, director of the Team Humber Marine Alliance. He and several other representatives of the industry have been speaking at a general election debate and suggesting that political parties should remain focused on providing offshore wind energy regardless of the outcome on May the 7th. Plans are in place for the largest wind turbine field in the world on the Dogger Bank off the Yorkshire coast, but like many other projects, this may well be hanging in the balance as we approach polling day. Dan Kemp went along to find out more.
Jobs are crucial when it comes to stimulating an economy, and it seems that this area isn't going short of good news on that front. Both the north and south banks of the Humber are set to benefit from the Energy Estuary Vision, which will see Siemens, amongst others, base themselves here. And these facilities will be there to provide for the mooted largest field of turbines in the world in the North Sea, but there are still hurdles to overcome before this becomes a reality.
It's great news. That will depend, as some of the other wind farms will, on future support from government. So that depends on things like contract for difference and the auction processes that government runs. And all those things, again, depend on political support. So if we have a set of MPs in the next Parliament who care about renewable energy, who want to see the Humber make a real success and keep on benefiting from offshore wind, then we need those MPs to be in close contact with the people who work in our industry already and the companies that employ them.
But while the offshore wind industry has been kept in the forefront of MPs' minds to ensure its stability and progress, members of Parliament for the region are all singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to a new £4 million growth deal extension, signed in Grimsby by local leaders and the Minister for Universities, Science and Cities. Small to medium-sized businesses now have been given the green light to apply for funding, thanks to the work of the leaders here.
Once again, it's great news for northern Lincolnshire and the wider Humber region. It shows the government's commitment to the area. We heard it from the Prime Minister only a couple of weeks ago, emphasising the importance of northern Lincolnshire to the economic future of the country. And the government are backing up their words with actual resources. This is one of many announcements over the last year or two that shows the support for the area, both for building infrastructure, for supporting training and skills, and developing the renewables industry.
We're backing success. Anyone that comes to this area, north or south bank of the Humber, can see that it's an area that's on a roll. We've got companies coming in investing, we've got new jobs being created, business, local councils, universities and colleges, all working together to build on the strengths of this area. And that's allowed us to say we're going to put more money in the hands of local people to back a winner.
And on a visit to the Grimsby Institute, Greg Clark MP suggested some of the areas that may get a boost.
Make a huge difference. So here we are in a college that's going to be training new engineers and new technicians, the workforce of the future, but they are the people that are going to be leaving school over the next few years, getting really good skills to take up these fantastic jobs. People that drive around the area will see improvements in some of the roads, whether it's in the city of Hull or some of the notorious bottlenecks here on the South Bank. That'll make a big difference. Also support for businesses. You know, there are a lot of new businesses being created. Sometimes they need a helping hand, some advice, so that would be available. These are the the issues that have been put forward by local people, and we've been very pleased to back them.
And if the Humber can bank on more support like this, we'll truly live by the energy estuary.
It's critically important that we have the support of government, and government, whoever it might be, needs to know those facts, that this is going to be a booming industry. For this part of the world, we see the Humber as being the Aberdeen of the offshore wind industry.
The sport with Dan Kemp.
Tickets have sold out for Hull City's Premier League clash with Queen's Park Rangers on Saturday. Both sides go into the game fighting to maintain their top division place, with the Tigers just 1 point and 1 place better off. City is 1 point above the drop zone with 13 games left to go. Meanwhile, it's been reported that midfielder Mohamed Diame could be in line for a shock return to action in the game. The Senegal midfielder has been out of action since early December, when he was taken off in the side's 1-1 draw at Everton, and it's hoped to return to action will boost the team's survival credentials. Scunthorpe United defender Niall Canavan is hoping his side can keep their current run of results and keep more clean sheets. The Iron beat Chesterfield 2-0 on Tuesday night and have lost just one of their last 6 games. The side have moved clear of the immediate relegation danger, with a 9-point gap opening up between them and bottom 4. Looking upwards, they're only 5 points from 6th place Doncaster. Hull Stingrays goaltender David Brown has been praised by Omar Pasha, the team's coach, for his run of recent form. The 30-year-old has fielded man-of-the-match performances in both the Rays' last 2 games, and they'll be hoping for more of the same with this weekend's doubleheader coming up in Scotland. Hull are at Fife on Saturday and the Edinburgh Capitals on Sunday. The wife of the late Hull FC star Steve Prescott is calling up for Hull FC fans to take their part in this year's Manchester Marathon to support the foundation in his name. The Great Manchester Run takes place on Sunday the 10th of May, and any money raised will add to the current £700,000 already raised by the foundation. And that's all for the sport.
Thanks, Dan. Just time now for our Dog of the Week.
Yeah, we had a tan and white Staffy dog. Seems fairly placid in the kennels. Don't do leads, but we find that Staffies are better on harnesses. They're more controllable. He's a bit hyper, but we do hand out dogstress vouchers, which can get him castrated, which should calm him down. In the kennel, he seems fine. He's friendly, no chewing. So another one that's looking for a good home for the winter months.
Beautiful. That's all we have time for this evening. I'm afraid if you have a story for us, then please go to Facebook, Twitter. Details on the screen, estuary.tv, or phone Grimsby 3155553. Until tomorrow, good evening.
Hello and welcome to Estuary TV's weather. After a cold start Friday, we'll be fine, with some sunshine and just an isolated shower. Winds will stay light, so it should feel fairly pleasant in any sunshine. The maximum temperature of 7 degrees. Very unsettled and windy with sunshine on wintry showers on Saturday.